At 37,000 feet above the Indian Ocean, a modern Airbus suddenly dropped out of stable flight. Inside the cabin, passengers were thrown upward as the aircraft pitched. Downward without warning, loose objects lifted into the air. Flight attendants struggled to stay upright. But in the cockpit, the situation didn't immediately register as a single, clear failure. The pilots pulled back on the controls. Nothing changed. They tried again. Still nothing at first. It looked like a complete loss of control. But something about it didn't match how failures usually behave. The aircraft wasn't shutting down, it was responding. Incorrectly, not an engine issue, not a fuel problem, not a simple loss of lift. So, what exactly takes control of a fully functioning airliner in mid-flight, without anyone giving it permission? On October 7, 2008, an Airbus A330 departed Singapore bound for Perth, over 300 passengers. On board, clear weather. Routine. Climb. Everything appeared normal in the early phase of the flight, at least on the surface. Shortly after takeoff, a minor technical message appeared in the cockpit systems. It wasn't critical. It cleared quickly. The crew followed. Procedure and continued climbing as expected. Nothing about it demanded concern at the end. Time. But later, investigators would return to that exact moment because the issue wasn't the warning itself, but what it represented inside the system. A small inconsistency had already appeared, and it didn't stay contained. It quietly spread deeper into the aircraft's data environment without triggering immediate awareness at that point. The flight still felt normal, even though something inside it already wasn't. 90 minutes into cruise, 37,000 feet above the ocean, autopilot engaged, cabin calm, then, without warning, it disconnects. Almost immediately, alerts begin appearing across multiple systems, but they don't. A Line 1 system indicates the aircraft is slowing toward a dangerous stall. Another shows it is accelerating beyond safe limits. Both cannot be correct. Yet both are being displayed at the same time. The pilots cross-check the instruments. The readings no longer match across systems. Speed data conflicts. Altitude data feels inconsistent. Even basic situational awareness starts to break apart. For a moment, the cockpit enters a state that aviation rarely allows. Not failure, but uncertainty about which version of reality is correct. And even as they're still trying to interpret the mismatch, the aircraft begins to behave on its own terms. Control is shifted to manual. For a brief moment, things stabilize, almost deceptively so. Then the aircraft begins to drop. Not gradually, not like turbulence. A sudden downward pitch toward the ocean. The pilots react immediately, pulling back on the controls, but the response feels incomplete, not ignored completely, just not fully translated into the aircraft's behavior. Inside the cabin, passengers are lifted from their seats as gravity shifts violently. Objects move freely. The aircraft loses altitude rapidly, and then, just as suddenly as it began, it stops. The descent ends. Stability returns. No gradual recovery, no visible correction. Process, just normal flight again. But what stands out isn't the drop itself. It's the absence of a clear reason why it stopped. As if the aircraft decided on its own, when the event was over, it doesn't take long before it returns. Faster this time. Less predictable. More aggressive in its onset. Passengers who had just recovered are thrown back into chaos inside the cockpit. The interpretation shifts. This is no longer viewed as a single malfunction. It's something that behaves with pattern-like structure, something that can return at this point. Continuing the flight to Perth is no longer considered safe. A diversion is declared toward the nearest suitable airport in Australia, not because control is fully lost, but because stability can no longer be trusted, and in aviation, that uncertainty is enough, because once predictability disappears, every decision becomes reaction instead of planning. Aircraft begins its descent toward Australia. Systems continue fluctuating. Between normal and abnormal behavior, nothing remains fully consistent, so every cockpit action becomes slower, more deliberate, more cross-checked than assumed. The runway eventually comes into view. Approach begins. For a brief period, everything appears stable again, but that stability is no longer trusted. Then the wheels touch. Down the aircraft rolls to a stop. No further. Incidents occur. All 315 passengers survive. Investigators later traced the event to corrupted flight data. That corrupted data fed incorrect information into critical aircraft systems, and the automation responded exactly as designed. Not incorrectly, but correctly, based on false inputs, which meant the aircraft was never truly failing in the traditional sense. It was reacting logically to a version of reality that didn't match the real world outside, and that created a deeper problem than malfunction, a system behaving perfectly inside incorrect information, even after the explanation. One question remained in technical discussions: why did the system continue escalating behavior instead of isolating the inconsistency earlier? That question still informs modern aviation system design today, because sometimes in aviation, the most dangerous situations are not caused by failure, not by weather, and not by human error, but by systems doing exactly what they were designed to do, based on a reality that no longer exists.